He wanted me to write for Bitcoin.com, so I gave him a number that I thought was ridiculous, and he came back and said, okay, we can do that. So I was like, you know what, I've thought about it. I'm going to have to back out.
Hello, welcome to episode 65 of The Bitcoin Game. I'm Rob Mitchell. I just got back from Bitcoin 2019, a Bitcoin conference in San Francisco, and I'm really glad I decided to go after taking a pretty long break from conferences. I had a great time and got some really good interviews. I'm going to release them in the order I recorded them, so first up is Jimmy Song. And I'd really like some listener feedback on this episode. This interview is unedited, whereas my typical episodes are heavily edited. I'm just trying to deliver super listenable, content-dense audio. But all that editing does take a ton of time, and it really reduces the amount of content I release. So please let me know how you feel about this unedited interview versus my typical episodes. I've got some pretty cool Bitcoin stuff to give away to a few people who give me feedback, just in case you need additional incentive. Now here's my talk with Jimmy Song.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Hello. There we go. Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
All right, cool.
Great.
All right. So this is cool. We're at Bitcoin 2019 in San Francisco, and it's really hard to find people who aren't in the middle of stuff. But I'm here with Jimmy Song, who I met a couple years ago, really briefly. And hi, Jimmy.
Good to be here with you.
So I feel like you came on the scene just out of nowhere a few years ago. I've heard interviews with you before. I know you were doing some programming on some Bitcoin stuff. But can you refresh me on your background?
Yeah, so I've been a programmer for over 20 years now. So I started doing that right out of school, and about 7 years ago or 8 years ago, I first heard about Bitcoin in 2011. And I was actually captured by the economic aspect. And this was after Bitcoin had broken like $1 or something like that. And I tried to buy it. I couldn't. It was like really annoying with Mt. Gox and Dwala and all the stuff that you had to go through back then. I eventually got some, but I didn't really get into the coding aspect until 2013. I started on a project called Color Coins at that time.
Oh, I did not remember that was you.
Well, I was part of the team.
Part of it. Okay.
There were a lot of other people on that team, including a certain someone that started another coin like 6 months later, Vitalik Buterin. So it's kind of crazy how everything comes back. But I was a part of that. I joined a company called Monetas a year in 2014, and then I worked for Armory, Bitcoin secure Bitcoin wallet, 2014, 2015. Then I did Paxos 2016, 2017, and that's really where I started doing a lot more writing. I did do some blogging back in 2014, but my articles weren't that popular for whatever reason. By the time 2017 came around, then I started blogging, and this was due to some people at Paxos wanting me to write some stuff, and I wrote them this long piece, and they were like, it's too Bitcoin focused, I don't think we can use it. And I shopped it around to see if anybody wanted it. Nobody wanted it, so I just published it on my own. And that one kind of went semi-viral, and it encouraged me to keep writing. And when I wrote that one, I think I had less than 300 followers on Twitter. And as a result of that and many other things that happened over the course of 2017, I think I got to something like 90,000 followers by the end of the year. So it was it really was kind of out of nowhere in many ways. I'd been doing stuff. I mean, there are questions on bitcoin.stackexchange.com that I answered in 2015. I did that a while back too. It's just from a public consciousness standpoint, I didn't really come into people's radars until 2017.
How come colored coins never really worked out? Were there some issues with it, or?
Well, so you could issue stuff, and here's the big thing that I've done some reflecting, because the project, I think, more or less failed in many ways. But the reflection that I had to have that the conclusion that I came to was that really we built this platform where you can issue any asset on the Bitcoin blockchain, right? It's kind of like being able to issue whatever asset on a lot of these other platforms that are sort of specialized for it. There are two things. One, we were too early. Nobody really wanted to do it back in 2013. And two, what I had thought was, okay, if you build a platform, then people will make viable businesses on it. And that's just not the case. You need a good business model. You need people to know that they can make money off of it. And this is where Ethereum sort of differentiated itself. Our thought, I think, in colored coins was, okay, now you can issue stocks or bonds, so something more like security tokens and bonds and things like that. What Vitalik figured out was that the big killer app is raising money from dumb people. And that's essentially what he's been doing ever since. And that's what Ethereum's been good at ever since. And that's it's a very different model, and that's basically what it was. But yeah, I mean, looking back, I now realize like it's still a centralized point of failure. So there's no real reason to do it on something expensive like a blockchain. You should be doing it more on a centralized service because you're going to come up against regulation anyway. So, yeah, it's some people are thinking of it as some sort of backdoor to legitimacy or something like that, or a semi-legal status that the government won't stop or something like that. That could be the case, but yeah, it didn't work because we were too early and there wasn't really a market for what we thought it should be, which is more like security tokens or whatever, and that's just not what was in demand.
And how do you think colored coins compare to Omni and Counterparty?
Well, I mean, Omni was a complete joke. Back then, it was called Mastercoin,
sure.
And you look at the code, and at one point, like there were 4 different block explorers for it, and there was a particular address that, if you looked up, had 4 different balances. So something was completely wrong. And their model of funding development by use of bounties was a mistake, because it's like you're not optimizing for security, you're optimizing for people wanting the bounty. So yeah, I mean, I don't know that much about Counterparty, but I don't think they had much of a market either. I mean, the only thing that I know that's on Counterparty that's really succeeded is like Rare Pepes, and it's kind of funny because like Rare Pepes and CryptoKitties are like the 2 success stories on those 2 platforms. Everything else is more or less like just people scamming each other out of money. Right. So.
And I just asked because I was intimately familiar with Counterparty, because Let's Talk Bitcoin, the whole platform was one of the earliest use cases with, I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but
yeah, I think there was a coin, right?
Yeah. LTB.
Well,
anyway.
I mean, Counterparty was sort of a reaction, I think, to Mastercoin, but the whole original concept was color coins.
Sure.
But I mean, looking back on it, I think it was. I'm glad of what I learned, especially with respect to a lot of the Bitcoin protocol stuff, because nothing makes you learn it like getting paid for it. But there was a lot of it's kind of polluting the blockchain, and it's not really the use case that I thought it was, and there wasn't a market for it.
Let me ask you about that. What do you have feelings about polluting the blockchain with non-economic or non-Bitcoin transactions?
Well, if somebody's willing to pay for it, then I mean, by definition, it's fine, right? I'm a libertarian. You can use it in whatever way. I'm not going to have moral judgments against you about it. Like you can go buy bread to feed your hungry kid. You can also go buy bread to like feed your camels, whatever, right? Like. What you do with what you buy is your business and not really mine. So they can do it, but this is where a fee market helps, because certain activities become uneconomical, and that's the idea behind that.
And how did you become a libertarian in the first place?
2008 was the big year. I mean, I started just asking questions. How are they, like, they're not raising our taxes. How do they have $700 billion to give to these banks or something? And started doing a lot more reading on Austrian economics and, what that was. And certainly by the time I got into Bitcoin, that was a lot of what I was reading. And it's been a natural progression for me. I think it just, and like most people, the economic crisis from 2008 affected me a lot.
Can you remind me again? I just couldn't remember if I had any other questions. What were the other projects after Colored Coins?
So I was part of Monetas, Armory.
What was
Paxos.
Monetas?
They were based in Switzerland, and it was building a business out of open transactions, and they wanted me to do the Bitcoin integration. That company didn't go anywhere. Okay. And the only thing that people might know about that company, if at all, is that the CEO was Johan Gavers. He of Tezos Foundation, board member, and basically I don't think he knew very much what he was doing, and the company failed. So but by then I had something going with Armory, so
okay,
it was all good. Now
Armory seemed pretty cool. Is Armory still around?
The open source project is, but that project also ran out of money. So we had some funding, but basically we ran out of money, and it's hard to build a business around the wallet because most people won't pay you for it. Though, it's interesting because we were also too early. We had a custody solution back in 2015, 2016 to create. Have multi-sig and all this other stuff and key management, key ceremonies, all that stuff. But there wasn't a demand for it because institutions weren't interested at that time.
Yeah, was that Trace's?
Trace Mayer was one of the big investors, yeah. So, that didn't go anywhere. It's too bad. Unfortunately, we ran out of money and we shut down. But out of that came Paxos. So.
Okay, and what is Paxos?
You might know them better as the Bitcoin exchange JitBit.
Okay.
But yeah, I was there for a couple of years. Did a bunch of stuff for them as a developer. But that's been a large part of my development career in Bitcoin is those three companies.
Okay.
And plus Color Coins, I guess, and other open source contributions.
All right. So then you came on the scene, and you started, I thought, giving some kind of instructional videos. It seemed really helpful to learn stuff. I'm not super technical, and I could relate to them. And then you started teaching classes. Are you still doing that?
Yeah, I am. I'm actually running a class Thursday and Friday here in San Francisco. But yeah, that's been my bread and butter. More or less for the last 2 years, and this was based on some stuff that I had learned starting in 2013, and I just remembered how hard it was for me as a developer to find all the resources to actually learn about all the stuff that I needed to learn, and there wasn't anything really to sort of onboard people. Andreas's book is great, and it's a great reference book. But taking you through all of the stuff that you need to know as a coder, I didn't feel like there was a real class for. And turned out I was right, and I started teaching, and it's been a couple of years. I've taught over 500 developers all over the world on from people from all 6 continents. I've done it on 5 different continents, and it's been very rewarding. A lot of those people are at this conference now. A lot of them work at really prominent Bitcoin companies. So I couldn't be more thrilled or proud of what my students have done.
Wow, that's so cool. Where do people go to find out more about that?
Programmingbitcoin.com, and there's Programming Blockchain is the name of the seminar, and you can. It's a little bit late to do the San Francisco one.
Sure.
But yeah, I'll probably have something in August. Maybe in Dallas. I'm not sure.
Okay. And how big are the classes?
It depends on when I do them, where I do them, and so on. I've had as many as 40. I've had as few as 5. So it really depends.
And now I know you have to be a developer, probably already have some coding skills.
Yeah, if you know Python, that's enough. I can teach you everything about Bitcoin. So that's the idea.
Really? So good at Python? Like my son's trying to learn some Python. He's 10. But.
Yeah. I mean, if you can... so there's an application on my website to apply to this program. And one of the questions is a coding question. And if you can do it, then you probably have enough Python skills to do it.
Cool. And is there a fixed fee, or does it depend on the location?
Well, if you apply a month ahead of time, it's one price. And if you do 2 weeks ahead of time, it's another price. If you do it within a very short window, and
gotcha,
it's another price.
Okay. So you've seen people here that are working and everything. I guess they must be really thankful to you for the class. And
oh, I mean, it's always good to see people again. I like this. One of my favorite things about conferences is reconnecting with a lot of old friends. I've been doing the conference circuit for a couple of years now, so you see a lot of the same people over and over, and it's fun to see how they're developing, what they're doing, what cool stuff they're working on.
Like how many conferences do you think you go to a year?
Oh, gosh. This year, I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 so far. So I'll probably do at least that many, or about that many for the rest of the year as well. So, 12 to 16, I guess.
Have you backed off? I feel like I don't see you on social media and videos and everything. Have you kind of backed off from where you...
Oh, I mean, I was taking a little bit of a break, just like taking care of some family stuff. So, but I mean, I'm gonna be off the grid again for about a month. But yeah, after that, I'll hopefully come back a little more refreshed and do other stuff. There's plenty of work for me to do.
Okay. What's your relationship like with Roger Ver?
He doesn't really talk to me.
No,
I've talked to him twice.
just on the stage?
Yeah, I mean, basically, there was that time he tried to hire me, but that's another whole story altogether.
A long time ago? Or
so this was like in 2017, I think. And, yeah, he wanted me to write for Bitcoin.com. And, yeah, I wrote back, like, I don't do this for the money, like this, it's like, I don't really, you're associated with this site. And so I gave him a number that I thought was ridiculous, and he came back and said, okay, we can do that.
Uh-oh.
So I was like, you know what, I've thought about it, I'm going to have to back out, because it's just... like there's a whole rehabilitation of Bitcoin.com that I don't want to be a part of, right? Like that's not the problem that I created, and I would have to do that. I don't do this for the money. It's more for education and things like that, for my investment. And he kept trying to convince me. I just told him no.
Was this after BCH?
No, it was pre.
It was before, but you already didn't like the big block talk.
Well, I mean, it was just sort of like he was being very aggressive with certain things, and he wanted me to write for them, and I'm sure in large part because of the reputation I had created. So I didn't want to throw that away. I mean, I've had other offers to participate in various scams, and I've been offered many millions of dollars to go do that, but it's not interesting to me, because that's, like the Bible says, right? Like, what can you exchange for your soul? If you could sell your soul and go do something scammy, but you only get to do that once, and I'd rather keep my soul. Thanks.
All right. Are you a religious man?
I'm a Christian, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I mean, it sounds like a good tenet to live by, regardless.
Yeah, you really don't want to sell your soul, no. and too many people in this industry have, and that's one of the more disappointing things. I think Tone and I were talking about this a while back. Back in like 2013, if you looked at like all the people that were in Bitcoin, a large number of them have gone over to the dark side and done something else. I mean, like he was pointing out, among non-developers, about the only person that hasn't succumbed to, like, you know, somebody offering them millions of dollars or something is like Trace Mayer. You know, like he hasn't gone over to any of those, but like a lot of these other guys, you know, Roger Ver and even Vitalik was a big prominent voice back then, and others. Yeah, they've gone over to do something else because they want the money, and they're thinking very short term and not long term.
So, you know, I don't know if I'm foolish. I tend to give a lot of those people the benefit of the doubt that they just really believe in what they're doing. You
could convince yourself of a lot if you're getting paid a lot of money to do it, right? Like I'm sure those people, a lot of those people are convinced that they're not running scams. And, you know, it's very hard to live with yourself if you think you're running a scam. Even like drug dealers and hitmen think that they're doing something at least beneficial to somebody. But yeah, I mean, this is the corrupting influence of money. Is that it's hard to convince a person of something if their, you know, job and income or portfolio depend on them believing it. So, and that's kind of the situation we find ourselves, is that there's a lot of bag holders that are justifying their position and like sort of shilling bags. I don't know if you've ever met somebody that did like one of those multi-level marketing schemes or whatever, but when they try to sell you, it's almost like they're desperate to sell to you, right? Because they have to believe it. They have to believe that they're not selling a scam in order for them to have any self-worth at all. And that's kind of how a lot of altcoiners are now these days. So, I mean, they might believe it to some degree, but it's like it's a very desperate kind of convenient belief, or it's something that they have to believe, not necessarily because it's true, but because their money depends on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think it's tough when everyone was like in the same Bitcoin group, and then it just splinters off, and it's awkward for me. One of the first guys I ever met in Bitcoin is splintered off, and it's weird how it can mess with the relationship. To me, in my head at least, it's
and that's true of almost every meetup that I go to around the world. Is that they've splintered into altcoin meetup and a Bitcoin meetup. And this has happened almost everywhere, and it's exactly because of what you said, which is that the old school people are very much into like they split, dark side, light side, that kind of thing. So,
do you think like I was wondering if something like confidential transactions or something like that is going to be another splitting event where people will?
I think it's much more likely on altcoins because you have people that are sort of big personalities in there, and they can get people to follow them. So, I mean, we saw that very prominently with Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV. That sort of thing is much more possible there because you have people that are the centers of those things. Bitcoin, I think, is decentralized enough. If you just don't agree, then you can either go make your own coin, in which case you voluntarily split yourself off, or you just keep going with the network, and it's still backwards compatible, so people can use it however they want to, as long as they're willing to pay whatever the cost is. So, my feeling is that will continue to be the case for Bitcoin. It'll just, like there might be hard forks or something like that, but that the real Bitcoin will remain. And that's, I mean, privacy might be an issue, but I don't know. I think we got some pretty good tech coming.
Okay. What are you excited about?
Lightning, side chains. There's a new paper on state chains, which I found really fascinating. It's compatible with Lightning, and it requires no on-chain transaction by using UTXOs to pass around, and You can use Lightning to split the UTXO and stuff. It's really absolutely fascinating, and I think it has tremendous potential to relieve the burden on chain. So.
State chains. Can a non-technical person get through the white paper, you think?
I haven't read it yet,
no.
But I did see the presentation, and Ruben is a pretty sharp guy. So, yeah, I mean, there's a presentation there was a presentation recorded during Breaking Bitcoin that should definitely take a look at if you're interested in that.
Looking for that OG Bitcoin keychain? You know, the ones introduced back in July 2013? People love these substantial keychains, and they visually represented Bitcoin on literally thousands of websites for almost 6 years. They're great gifts to or from Bitcoiners, and they're even available with free shipping via Amazon Prime. Just go to btckeychain.com for more info. That's btckeychain.com.
Anything surprised you in the past 6 months or year about Bitcoin? Or
how fast it's recovered.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like from a price perspective, I thought we were in for another year of a bear market, but it doesn't look like that's the case.
Okay. Yeah, it's been hard. Well, I guess you're pretty close with Tone, and I guess I don't stay up on all his calls, but I remember when it was still pretty high, him calling pretty low, and he was pretty accurate, I felt like.
Yeah, I think he knew the general trend of the market. Maybe he didn't get the exact numbers. Yeah, I mean, we'll see where it goes. I think this conference, like you and I were talking about this conference is a pretty good indicator of like the bull being back. There's just so many people here. And even at last night's event at Blockchain Capital with the Lightning pitch event, there were tons of people there. And, you know, I don't know if you were around you were. Like 2014, 2015, there were just like 5 people showing up at Bitcoin meetups and stuff like that. This is an indicator of a bull market for me, is when people start showing up to stuff like this. And it's. Yeah, well,
it's definitely, I was hoping the market would be up for this. It seems like it makes it a little happier, makes me feel like I can afford the trip a little better and everything. But I started my podcast and toward the end of 2014, not really the brightest time. My first episode was at they had a Bitcoin job fair. They first had one up around here, and then they had one in Santa Monica, and so I interviewed people at that. But it was, very, I guess everyone gets stuff done during the bear market times, and everyone goes crazy at these times.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like we're at the beginning of it. That's what it really feels like to me.
Cool. And do you have I'm just always curious, because I feel like I see you with Tone a lot. Are you guys pretty tight?
Yeah. I mean, we hang out a lot at these conferences usually. And yeah, I mean, he and I have had a very good relationship since we were on the World Crypto Network together. I mean, we've done a lot of podcasts and stuff like that. It's interesting because I'm like a family man with like 6 kids, and he's like a single guy, in New York, travels all over the world. I guess we're both immigrants, but yeah, I'm a Christian. He's a Jew. Like all that stuff.
I'm finding out so much stuff I never had. Kids, everyone's religion.
Yeah. But
right.
But like we have a really good professional relationship, and he's helped me with a lot of stuff, and I've helped him with some stuff, and yeah, I mean I consider him a pretty good friend. So yeah.
Cool. Well, what's he like as a friend? Like I just see him on the camera, and
yeah, he tells it like it is, right? And this is one of the things that make it so that he and I work well together, which is that we're not afraid of saying whatever might offend people, and this is something that I think I learned from Tone, is that if you're authentic, even if people disagree with you. You're much more listenable, or more interesting to listen to, because at least you're not being lied to, and there's a lot of liars out there, especially like in the evening news or whatever. They're all polished, and they come off a certain way or whatever. But the thing that people really seek in a lot of interactions today is authenticity, and that's something that I've learned from him, and that's something that I really deeply appreciate about him.
Sure, I think the authenticity and strong beliefs, point of view.
I mean, it's okay to have strong beliefs, and it's okay to disagree. The thing is to be respectful about it and like be okay that someone's not agreeing with you. And that's something I think he's genuinely good at is, I mean, he'll call out all the scams and stuff, but, he'll still be friendly. Like he has drinks with people.
Oh, I remember him with Craig Wright.
Yeah. And that's a very good quality to have, something I really appreciate about him.
And that does get weird, again, with all the tribalism in this thing.
Yeah, I mean, you could disagree, but, people are still human, and that's something that I try to strive to do is, like no matter what, like just be nice to people, at least in person, right? Online, it's a little different because it gets to be like trolling or other people are watching or whatever. But in person, I think you should be nice to everybody that you can be nice to. I mean, if they're punching you in the face, it's a different deal. But that's how I try to live.
Cool. Are there any non-Bitcoin cryptocurrency projects that you don't hate?
I mean, I think there's interesting stuff out there and interesting research being done and interesting experiments being done. But I see Bitcoin as the only like economically interesting project because it's actually decentralized. Everything else, in my view, is centralized. And until it crosses that chasm, it's not really different than a fiat money.
Okay. So Ethereum, because of Vitalik, is that the centralization?
Yeah, I mean, Vitalik, Infura, Ethereum Foundation, I mean, they're all single points of failure. And any government that wants to regulate Ethereum can very easily.
And then after that, is it just the mining that's centralized, or
I mean,
go down the coins?
I mean, almost every other coin, like you had this massive coordination problem with most of these coins, right? Like even something like Bitcoin Cash, which split off of Bitcoin, so it had inherited a large code base and all this other stuff. Well, they couldn't get a big developer ecosystem going, and they essentially everything centralized around Amory Sachet, and that's the main central point of failure. It is extremely difficult to have a decentralized coin, and that's the only thing that makes Bitcoin that interesting. You could have centralized currencies. We've had them digitally for a long time with the U.S. dollar, even like World of Warcraft gold. I mean, people trade in that too. But those aren't that interesting because they're centrally controlled, and that means they can get inflated and seized and all this other stuff. But Bitcoin is very different in that it's actually decentralized. Ethereum, Vitalik says, okay, that was a bad smart contract. We're going to roll all those back. That's what happens. And other coins, I think, have that same potential. So, but Bitcoin, not going to happen, right? Like even the suggestion of it, like by the Binance guys and stuff like that, huge blowback. Mm-hmm. It's the blocks are sacred, and that's what's really interesting about it.
And I'm supposed to talk to Jeremy Rubin here, but he said he doesn't want to bring. Do you have any ill will toward Jeremy?
No, absolutely not. I try to harbor no real ill will towards anybody.
People got so
right?
mad.
No, I mean he's done good work, and the thing about this space is that there's a lot of people that try to discredit a person just based on like one statement or something like that. But I mean, yeah, it really should be a little more forgiving. I don't know. Sure. At least I think.
And anything you think is a big risk to Bitcoin?
Right now, the big risk, I would say, like I thought for a while that developers were the big bottleneck, and this is why I've been training so many of them. I think that's subsided a little bit. The other risks are more like theoretical, breaking a particular hash function or something like that. Possibly a state actor trying to get in. I think we're still somewhat vulnerable to that. But I don't think states really have that kind of willpower.
What would their attack be?
Some sort of, political like banning and then seizing miners and then using them for their own purpose, essentially using violence as a way to combat Bitcoin. I don't think they have the political will to do that, and if they did, then there's also jurisdictional arbitrage that would work against them. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't thought enough about the possible attack vectors at this point, because the big choke point I thought was developers, which still might be the case, but it's relieved a bit since a lot more developers have come in.
Okay. So how confident are you that Bitcoin will still be Bitcoin in 10 years?
Pretty confident. It's already been 10 years that it's existed. Lindy effect, right?
I'm just really curious about people's confidence levels with people like Matt Corello. Seems like sometimes he's like, this is still beta,
Yeah, and he's closer to sort of the security aspects of it. And, you're always, like a good engineer always thinks about what could go wrong. And sometimes that, you assign it a greater probability on some of that stuff than maybe other people do. And, it's neither right or nor wrong, but I his pessimism is probably warranted given his position.
Yeah, and I guess it's a personality type too. I tend to be someone like that too. I look at the downside probably too much. So what percentage, 10 years, Bitcoin's still a major thing?
I would say 90%.
90. Okay. So you got 10% leeway.
Yeah.
There. I mean, I feel like some people are like 99.9. They're so, and I'm not that sure about anything in my life.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's hard to say for sure about. It's one of the things that I think I'm more certain about than almost anything else.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I don't want to monopolize too much of your time. I feel like I just rap with you all day long, but I really appreciate you taking the time, being my first interview. I'm going to give you a trinket if you want one. Actually, here, I'll do this.
Okay. Oh, what is this?
Oh, I've been 3D printing various things. And I was saying whoever would come for the first interview, this is like a little spinner thing.
Oh, like a Bitcoin spinning...
Just me playing around.
Like wheels within wheels or something. Yeah, that's cool.
So you don't have to take it, but if you'd like
I would love it. Thank you.
All right.
My kids will love this thing.
Cool. Well, they might break it. It's just plastic.
That's all right. I had lots of things break in my house.
We'll try to keep it around for a little while. All right. Well, thanks so much, Jimmy.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for listening to my talk with Jimmy Song. Jimmy's website is programmingbitcoin.com, and his Twitter handle is @JimmySong. Again, please give me feedback on this unedited interview versus my usual content, and you might win a cool Bitcoin giveaway. Just comment on this episode's show notes page at thebitcoingame.com, or I'm the BTC Game on Twitter. See you next time.